Sarah stared at the family group chat on her phone, watching message after message pop up about her adoptive mother's upcoming 60th birthday celebration. Her heart sank as she realized something that made her stomach twist into knots. Nobody had mentioned her name once in the planning discussion that had been going on for 3 days straight. Her adoptive sister Emma was coordinating everything from the restaurant booking to the guest list. Her brother David was handling the decorations and music playlist. Even her younger adoptive brother Tom, who rarely participated in family events, was actively suggesting gift ideas and offering to pick up the custom birthday cake. Sarah scrolled through dozens of messages, hoping to find some small indication that her family remembered she existed. Instead, she found detailed discussions about seating arrangements that didn't include her name, gift coordination that bypassed her completely, and excited chatter about surprises that she wasn't part of planning. The silence around her participation was deafening. It wasn't that they had forgotten to invite her. It was worse than that. They were planning everything as if she simply wasn't part of the family at all. Sarah had been adopted by the Martinez family when she was 8 years old, after spending 3 years in foster care. Margaret and Roberto Martinez had welcomed her with open arms, promising her a forever home where she would never feel alone again. For the first few years, that promise had felt genuine and real. But somewhere along the way, things had started to change. The subtle shifts began when Emma started high school and became more interested in maintaining her social image. Having an adopted sister who looked different and had a complicated background didn't fit the perfect family narrative Emma preferred to project. David had always been kind but distant, treating Sarah more like a houseguest than a sister. Tom, being the youngest and closest to Sarah in age, had been her ally for years, but lately even he seemed to be pulling away, influenced by his older siblings' attitudes. The adoptive parents, Margaret and Roberto, had good intentions, but they often seemed overwhelmed by the family dynamics. They loved Sarah genuinely, but they also wanted peace in their household, which sometimes meant avoiding confrontation about the growing divide between Sarah and her siblings. Sarah had learned to navigate this careful balance over the years. She participated in family events when explicitly invited, stayed quiet during conflicts, and tried not to rock the boat. She had convinced herself that this was normal, that all families had complicated relationships, and that her gratitude for being adopted should outweigh any hurt feelings about not quite fitting in. But this birthday situation was different. This wasn't about being forgotten in the moment or overlooked accidentally. This was deliberate exclusion from something important, and it hurt in a way that Sarah hadn't experienced before. She tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they assumed she would automatically be included without needing to be mentioned specifically. Maybe they thought it was obvious that she would be there. Maybe she was overthinking the whole situation and creating problems where none existed. But deep down, Sarah knew better. She had lived with this family long enough to understand the subtle ways she was treated differently. The way conversations sometimes stopped when she entered a room. The way family photos were sometimes taken when she wasn't around. The way her achievements were acknowledged but not celebrated with the same enthusiasm as her siblings' accomplishments. Sarah's phone buzzed with another message from the group chat. Emma had posted a photo of a beautiful necklace she planned to give their mother, asking for everyone's opinions. The responses were immediate and enthusiastic. David loved it. Tom thought it was perfect. Even some extended family members who had been added to the chat were commenting with heart emojis and approval. Sarah typed a response 3 different times and deleted it each time. What could she say? That the necklace was beautiful? That she wished she had been consulted about gift coordination? That she felt completely left out of something that should have included her? Instead, she put her phone face down on her desk and tried to focus on her college assignments. She was in her junior year studying social work, ironically drawn to helping families and children navigate difficult situations. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was learning about family dynamics and healthy communication while struggling with these exact issues. In her own life, her roommate Jessica walked into their shared dorm room and immediately noticed Sarah's expression. Jessica had heard enough stories over the years to recognize when Sarah was dealing with family drama. "What's wrong?" Jessica asked, settling onto her own bed with genuine concern in her voice. Sarah showed her the group chat conversation, scrolling through the messages so Jessica could see the extent of the planning that had happened. without any acknowledgement of Sarah's existence. Jessica's eyebrows raised higher with each message she read. As someone from a close-knit biological family, she couldn't understand how siblings could plan their mother's birthday celebration while completely ignoring one of their own. "This is messed up, Sarah," Jessica said bluntly. "They're planning your mom's party like you don't exist. That's not normal, and it's not okay." Sarah appreciated Jessica's validation, but she also felt defensive about her family. Despite everything, they were still the people who had given her a home when she desperately needed one. She felt guilty for complaining about people who had rescued her from a difficult situation. "Maybe I should just text and ask about it," Sarah suggested, though even as she said it, she dreaded the potential responses she might receive. "You shouldn't have to ask to be included in your own mother's birthday celebration," Jessica pointed out. "But if you want to give them a chance to fix this, I think you should say something." Sarah picked up her phone again and stared at the group chat. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she tried to figure out what to say that wouldn't sound accusatory or needy, but would still communicate that she wanted to be included. The conversation in the chat had moved on to discussing the playlist for the party. David was sharing song suggestions, and Emma was approving or vetoing each one based on their mother's preferences. The casual nature of their planning, combined with her complete absence from it, made Sarah feel like an outsider looking in on a family that she had thought was her own. She realized that this moment was going to define how she handled family relationships going forward. She could stay silent and hope for the best, or she could advocate for herself and risk making things uncomfortable for everyone. Sarah finally gathered the courage to type a message in the group chat. Her hands were shaking slightly as she wrote, "Hey everyone, the party sounds amazing. What time should I be there? And is there anything specific you need me to bring or help with?" She hit send before she could change her mind, then immediately regretted the decision. The message felt too eager, too desperate. She watched as the 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times, indicating that people were typing and then stopping. Emma was the first to respond, and her message made Sarah's heart sink even further. "Oh, Sarah, we thought you'd be too busy with school stuff. Didn't you mention having a big project due around this time?" Sarah stared at the message in disbelief. She had never mentioned any project. In fact, she had specifically kept her schedule clear around her mother's birthday, anticipating that there would be family celebrations she'd want to participate in. David's response came next. "Yeah, and the restaurant has limited space. We already confirmed the head count with them." Tom, who had always been more direct than his older siblings, added, "Plus, Mom seemed fine with just keeping it small this year." The messages felt like carefully constructed excuses, each one designed to make Sarah's exclusion seem reasonable and considerate, rather than hurtful and deliberate. They were giving her an easy way to back down gracefully, to pretend that being left out had been her choice all along. But Sarah knew her adoptive mother Margaret well enough to know that she would never have agreed to exclude Sarah from her birthday celebration. Margaret had always gone out of her way to make Sarah feel included, even when the siblings made it difficult. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. The caller ID showed her adoptive mother's name, and Sarah hesitated before answering. She wasn't sure she could have a normal conversation right now without letting her hurt feelings show. "Hi, Mom," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sarah, sweetie, I just saw the group chat." Margaret's voice was warm but concerned. "I want you to know that I had no idea they were planning anything. They told me they were handling my birthday this year, but they never mentioned that you weren't included." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness hearing her mother's words. Relief that Margaret wasn't part of the exclusion, but sadness that her siblings had apparently convinced their mother that a celebration without Sarah was what she wanted. "Emma seems to think I'm too busy with school," Sarah said, not wanting to directly accuse her siblings of lying but hoping her mother would read between the lines. "Nonsense," Margaret said firmly. "You're never too busy for family, and I would never want to celebrate my birthday without you there." "I'm going to talk to them about this." "Mom, please don't," Sarah said quickly. "I don't want to cause problems or make them feel like they have to include me." "You're not causing problems, Sarah. You're my daughter, and you belong at my birthday celebration just as much as anyone else." "I'm disappointed that they would plan something like this without including you." After they hung up, Sarah felt somewhat better knowing that her mother hadn't intentionally excluded her. But she also felt worse knowing that her siblings had made this choice completely on their own, without any pressure from their parents. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Emma in the group chat. "Actually, Sarah, we can probably make room for one more at the restaurant. Let me call them and see what we can do." The message felt grudging and reluctant, like Emma was only extending the invitation because their mother had probably confronted her about it. Sarah could imagine the conversation that had just taken place in the Martinez household, with Margaret demanding to know why Sarah hadn't been included from the beginning. David quickly followed up. "Yeah, of course you should come. Sorry for the confusion," Tom added. "It'll be fun to have everyone there." But their messages felt hollow and forced. Sarah could read the reluctance between the lines. They were including her now because they had been caught excluding her, not because they genuinely wanted her there. Sarah was still staring at her phone, trying to decide how to respond, when Jessica returned to their dorm room with her boyfriend Marcus. Marcus was Emma's boyfriend's roommate, and through that connection, he had gotten to know Sarah's family dynamics better than most people outside the situation. "You look upset," Marcus observed immediately. "Everything okay?" Sarah explained the situation, while Jessica filled in the parts she had witnessed earlier. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. "That's really messed up," Marcus said when Sarah finished. "I've met your siblings a few times, and I always got the feeling that they treated you differently. But this is next level. What should I do?" Sarah asked. "They're saying I can come now, but it feels like pity inclusion. Like they're only inviting me because they got in trouble." Marcus considered this for a moment. "You know what? My family went through something similar when my parents got divorced and my dad remarried. My stepmother's kids never really accepted my sister and me, even though our stepmom tried hard to make us feel included." "What happened?" Sarah asked, curious about how other people navigated complicated family dynamics. "Eventually, my sister and I realized that we couldn't force people to want us around. But we also realized that we didn't have to accept being treated as less than by people who claimed to be our family. We started building our own traditions and finding our own ways to celebrate important occasions." Jessica nodded in agreement. "You don't have to choose between being excluded and being included reluctantly. There might be other options." Sarah felt a spark of something that might have been hope. She had been so focused on either being included in her siblings' celebration or being left out entirely that she hadn't considered other possibilities. "What kind of other options?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "Well, what if you planned something special for your mom that was just from you? Something that showed how much you care about her without depending on your siblings to make it happen?" The idea intrigued Sarah. She had always been creative and thoughtful when it came to gifts and celebrations. Maybe this was an opportunity to show her mother how much she meant to her in a way that didn't require her siblings' cooperation or approval. "I could take her out for lunch earlier in the week," Sarah mused. "Somewhere nice, just the two of us. We could have a real conversation without all the family chaos." "That sounds perfect," Jessica said enthusiastically. "Your mom would probably love having one-on-one time with you." But even as Sarah started planning her own celebration with her mother, she couldn't shake the hurt feelings about being excluded from the family event. The fact that her mother would now have two separate birthday celebrations, one with her other children and one with Sarah, felt like a symbol of how divided their family had become. Sarah decided to respond to the group chat with dignity. Even though her heart was still heavy from the entire situation, she typed, "Thank you for checking about adding space at the restaurant. I appreciate the thought, but I've already made other plans for Mom's birthday. I hope you all have a wonderful time celebrating." She sent the message before she could second-guess herself, then immediately turned off her phone notifications. She didn't want to see their responses right away, whether they were relief at not having to include her or fake disappointment at her absence. The next morning, Sarah called her mother to set up their private lunch celebration. Margaret was delighted by the idea and suggested a small Italian restaurant that had been her favorite for years, but that the family rarely visited because the siblings found it too quiet and boring. "It'll be perfect. Just you and me," Margaret said warmly. "I've been wanting to have a real conversation with you without all the noise and distractions. We can catch up properly." Sarah spent the next few days planning every detail of their lunch. She made reservations at the restaurant, arranged for flowers to be delivered to their table, and even put together a photo album of her favorite memories with Margaret over the years. She wanted this celebration to be meaningful and special, something that showed her gratitude for having Margaret as a mother. Meanwhile, Jessica kept Sarah updated on what Marcus was hearing about the family party planning. Through Emma's boyfriend, Jake, Marcus learned that the siblings were actually relieved that Sarah had declined to attend their celebration. Emma had apparently said that it would be less complicated without Sarah there, and David had agreed that it would be more relaxed for everyone. This information stung, but it also confirmed what Sarah had suspected. Her presence wasn't just unwanted. It was seen as a source of tension and complication by her siblings. She was glad she had chosen to create her own celebration, rather than forcing herself into a situation where she wasn't truly welcome. The day of Margaret's birthday arrived, and Sarah felt nervous but excited as she prepared for their lunch. She had chosen her outfit carefully, wanting to look nice for their special afternoon together. She arrived at the restaurant early to make sure the flowers were in place and everything was perfect. When Margaret arrived, her face lit up at the sight of the beautiful table setup. The flowers were gorgeous, the lighting was warm and intimate, and Sarah had even arranged for the restaurant to prepare Margaret's favorite dessert as a surprise. "Oh, Sarah," Margaret said, tears forming in her eyes, "this is absolutely beautiful. You've put so much thought into every detail." They spent the first hour catching up on Sarah's college life, her social work studies, and her future plans. Margaret was genuinely interested in every aspect of Sarah's life, asking thoughtful questions and offering encouragement about her career goals. "I'm so proud of what you're studying," Margaret said. "Social work is such important work, and I know you'll be amazing at helping families navigate difficult situations. You have such empathy and understanding." Sarah felt a warm glow at her mother's words. This was the kind of support and encouragement she had been craving from her family, and getting it from Margaret meant everything to her. When Sarah presented the photo album she had created, Margaret was visibly moved. The album chronicled their relationship from Sarah's adoption day through recent family vacations and holidays. Each photo was accompanied by Sarah's handwritten memories and thoughts about what that moment had meant to her. "Look at this one," Margaret said, pointing to a photo from Sarah's high school graduation. "I remember being so proud watching you walk across that stage. You had overcome so much to get there, and you did it with such grace and determination. You and Dad were the only family I had cheering for me that day," Sarah said quietly. "That meant everything to me." Margaret paused, looking more closely at the photo. In it, she and Roberto were beaming with pride. But Sarah was right. Her siblings were notably absent from the graduation ceremony. Emma had had a soccer tournament, David had been at a friend's party, and Tom had complained about being bored and stayed home. "I'm realizing now that your siblings haven't always been as supportive as they should have been," Margaret said carefully. "I think Roberto and I got so focused on trying to keep peace in the house that we didn't always address the times when you were being treated unfairly." This was the first time Margaret had directly acknowledged the family dynamics that Sarah had been dealing with for years. Sarah felt a mixture of validation and sadness hearing her mother finally recognize what had been happening. "I never wanted to cause problems," Sarah said. "I was always grateful that you and Dad adopted me, and I didn't want to seem ungrateful by complaining about how Emma, David, and Tom treated me. You weren't causing problems, sweetheart," Margaret said firmly. "And you have every right to expect to be treated as an equal member of this family. The fact that you're adopted doesn't make you any less my daughter, or any less deserving of love and respect from your siblings." They talked honestly about the family dynamics for the first time ever. Margaret admitted that she had noticed the exclusion and different treatment, but had hoped it would resolve itself as the children got older. She acknowledged that she and Roberto should have intervened more directly when they saw Sarah being left out or treated differently. "The birthday party situation was the wake-up call I needed," Margaret said. "I had no idea they were planning a celebration without including you until I saw that group chat message. I was horrified." "What did you say to them?" Sarah asked, curious about the conversation that had led to their reluctant invitation. "I told them that any celebration of my birthday that didn't include all of my children wasn't a celebration I wanted to be part of," Margaret said. "I explained that you are just as much my daughter as they are my children, and that excluding you was unacceptable." Sarah felt a surge of love and gratitude toward her mother. Margaret had stood up for her in a way that she had been hoping for but hadn't dared to expect. How did they react? Sarah asked. Margaret sighed. Not as well as I had hoped. Emma got defensive and said they thought I would prefer a smaller celebration. David claimed it was just a misunderstanding about the restaurant capacity. Tom didn't say much of anything. They offered to include me after you talked to them, but it felt forced, Sarah admitted, like they were only doing it because they got in trouble. That's exactly why I'm so glad you chose to do this instead, Margaret said, gesturing around the restaurant. This feels genuine and heartfelt. This is the kind of celebration I actually want, quality time with someone who truly wants to be here with me. As their lunch continued, Sarah felt lighter than she had in days. Having her mother's full attention and support was healing in a way she hadn't expected. Margaret asked about Sarah's friendships, her romantic interests, her hopes for the future, and her concerns about her career path. I want you to know, Margaret said as they were finishing their meal, that Roberto and I are going to start addressing these family dynamics more directly. We love all of our children, but that doesn't mean we're going to continue tolerating behavior that makes you feel excluded or less than. Sarah felt a mixture of hope and apprehension about this promise. She wanted her family relationships to improve, but she also worried about creating more conflict by having her parents intervene on her behalf. The afternoon had been perfect, exactly what Sarah had hoped for when she decided to create her own celebration. But as they prepared to leave the restaurant, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message that would change everything about how she viewed her family situation. The message on Sarah's phone was from Jake, Emma's boyfriend. This was unusual because Jake had never contacted Sarah directly before. They had met several times at family gatherings and had always been polite to each other, but they didn't have the kind of relationship where they would typically text each other. The message read, "Hey Sarah, I heard about what happened with your mom's birthday planning. I think you should know that I disagreed with how Emma and your siblings handled this situation. Would you be okay if I called you? There are some things I think you should know about." Sarah showed the message to Margaret, who looked surprised and curious. That's unexpected, Margaret said. Jake has always seemed like a nice young man. I wonder what he wants to tell you. Sarah was hesitant to get involved in more family drama, especially through Emma's boyfriend. But she was also curious about what Jake might know that she didn't. She decided to respond, "Sure, you can call me. I'm with my mom right now finishing up lunch, but I'll be free in about an hour." Margaret and Sarah finished their celebration on a high note, with Margaret promising to talk to Roberto about having a family meeting to address the ongoing issues with Sarah's siblings. Sarah felt closer to her adoptive mother than she had in years, and the private lunch had been everything she had hoped it would be. When Sarah got back to her dorm room, Jake called within minutes. Jessica was out, so Sarah had privacy for what she suspected might be a difficult conversation. "Hi, Sarah," Jake said, his voice serious. "I've been wanting to reach out to you for a while now, but I wasn't sure if it was my place to get involved in family stuff." "What's going on, Jake?" Sarah asked, settling onto her bed and preparing for whatever revelations he might share. "I was there when Emma, David, and Tom were planning your mom's party," Jake said. "I was at Emma's apartment helping her with something else, and they started discussing all the details. When I asked if you would be there, Emma said no, like it was obvious that you wouldn't be included." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but she wasn't surprised by this information. "What did you say?" "I asked why you weren't invited, and Emma got defensive. She said that you were always dramatic about family events and that it would be easier for everyone if you weren't there. David agreed and said that you sometimes made things awkward by trying too hard to fit in." These words hit Sarah like a physical blow. To hear that her siblings not only excluded her but also talked about her in such dismissive terms was painful beyond what she had expected. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Jake continued. "I know this is hard to hear, but I felt like you deserved to know what was really being said about you when you weren't around." "What else did they say?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Jake hesitated before continuing. "Tom said that they all felt like they had to walk on eggshells around you because you were adopted, and that it was exhausting to constantly worry about making you feel included. Emma said that your parents always took your side in conflicts because they felt guilty about the adoption situation." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. These were her deepest fears about her family relationships being confirmed. The idea that her siblings saw her as a burden, that they felt they couldn't be themselves around her, was devastating. But here's the thing, Sarah, Jake said, his tone becoming more intense. I've been around your family for 2 years now, and I've watched how they treat you. What they're saying doesn't match what I've observed. What do you mean? Sarah asked, wiping away tears. You don't try too hard to fit in. You're actually pretty quiet at family events, and you go out of your way not to cause problems. You're not dramatic. In fact, you seem to minimize your own needs and feelings to keep everyone else comfortable. And your parents don't take your side in conflicts because most of the time, you don't even speak up when you're being treated unfairly. Sarah was surprised by Jake's observations. She had never realized that someone outside the family had been paying attention to these dynamics. I've seen Emma interrupt you in conversations and dismiss your opinions, Jake continued. I've watched David exclude you from sibling activities and Tom ignore you when you try to participate in family discussions. But you never fight back or demand better treatment. You just quietly accept it. I don't want to cause problems, Sarah said softly. They're my family and I'm grateful that they took me in. Sarah, listen to me, Jake said firmly. Being grateful for being adopted doesn't mean you have to accept being treated as a second-class family member. You deserve the same respect and inclusion as your siblings, and the fact that you don't demand it doesn't make their behavior okay. This conversation was giving Sarah a perspective on her family dynamics that she had never considered before. Having an outsider validate her experiences and point out things she had been too close to see clearly was both painful and liberating. Why are you telling me all this? Sarah asked. Won't this create problems between you and Emma? Jake was quiet for a moment. Honestly, this whole situation has made me question some things about Emma and her character. I care about her, but watching how she treats you has been really hard for me. I come from a blended family myself, and we would never exclude one of our siblings the way your siblings exclude you. What do you think I should do? Sarah asked, feeling overwhelmed by everything she was learning. I think you should stop trying to earn their acceptance, Jake said. You're never going to be able to make them include you or treat you fairly if they don't want to. But that doesn't mean you should just accept being excluded. I don't understand, Sarah said. You should start focusing on the relationships that do work, Jake explained. Your parents clearly love you and want you to feel included. You have friends like Jessica who care about you and treat you well. Maybe it's time to stop putting so much energy into relationships with people who don't appreciate you. This advice resonated with Sarah in a way she hadn't expected. She had been so focused on trying to fix her relationships with her siblings that she hadn't fully appreciated the good relationships she did have. There's something else I want to tell you, Jake said. I talked to Emma about the birthday situation after your mom called her out about excluding you. I told her I thought what they did was wrong and that she should apologize to you genuinely. How did she react? Sarah asked. Not well, Jake admitted. She got angry and said that I didn't understand the family dynamics. She said that you were always playing the victim and that she was tired of having to manage your feelings. Sarah felt another wave of hurt at these words, but Jake's next statement surprised her. That's when I realized that Emma and I might not be as compatible as I thought we were, Jake said. Her attitude toward you has shown me a side of her character that I don't like. Someone who can be so dismissive of their siblings' feelings isn't someone I want to build a future with. Sarah was shocked by this revelation. Jake, I don't want to be the reason you and Emma have problems. You're not the reason, Jake said firmly. Emma's choices and attitudes are the reason. You've just helped me see what kind of person she really is when it comes to treating people with kindness and respect. The conversation with Jake lasted another 30 minutes, during which he shared more observations about the family dynamics and offered Sarah perspective on her situation that she had never gotten from anyone else. By the time they hung up, Sarah felt like she had a clearer understanding of her family relationships than she had ever had before. But she also felt more confused than ever about what to do with this new information and how it might change her approach to her family going forward. The weekend of Margaret's actual birthday party arrived, and Sarah found herself feeling unexpectedly anxious despite having made peace with not attending. She kept wondering how the celebration was going and whether her absence was even being noticed by her siblings. Jessica noticed Sarah's restless energy and suggested they go see a movie to keep her distracted during the time when the family party would be happening. Sarah gratefully accepted, and they spent the evening watching a comedy that managed to keep her mind off her family situation for a few hours. When they returned to the dorm room later that evening, Sarah had several missed calls and text messages on her phone. Her heart rate increased as she saw notifications from her parents, but also surprisingly from Tom, her youngest adoptive brother. The first message she read was from her mother. Sarah, sweetheart, I missed you so much at dinner tonight. The celebration felt incomplete without you there. I kept thinking about our lovely lunch together and wishing you were with us. Her father, Roberto, had sent a similar message. The party was nice, but it wasn't the same without our whole family together. I hope you know how much we love you and how important you are to us. But it was Tom's message that really surprised her. Hey Sarah, can you call me when you get this? I want to talk to you about some stuff that happened at the party tonight. It's important. Sarah decided to call Tom back, curious about what he might want to discuss. Tom was only 2 years younger than Sarah, and while they had grown apart as he got older and more influenced by Emma and David, they had once been close. Sarah, I'm really glad you called me back, Tom said when he answered. I've been thinking about a lot of stuff lately, especially after what happened with Mom's birthday planning. What's going on, Tom? Sarah asked, settling in for what she sensed might be an important conversation. I need to apologize to you, Tom said, his voice serious in a way that was unusual for him. I've been going along with Emma and David's attitude toward you for years now, and I realize that I've been part of the problem. Sarah was stunned by this admission. Tom had never acknowledged the family dynamics before, let alone taken responsibility for his role in them. What made you realize this? Sarah asked. A bunch of things, but tonight really opened my eyes, Tom explained. At the party, Mom and Dad kept talking about how much they missed having you there. They mentioned the photo album you made for Mom and how thoughtful it was. They were clearly more affected by your absence than Emma and David wanted to admit. How did Emma and David react to that? Sarah asked. Not well, Tom said. Emma kept trying to change the subject whenever Mom or Dad brought you up. David made a couple of comments about how you were probably happier doing your own thing anyway, but the more they tried to dismiss your absence, the more obvious it became that Mom and Dad were genuinely hurt by the situation. Tom paused, and Sarah could hear him taking a deep breath before continuing. But the real wake-up call came when Emma's boyfriend Jake showed up near the end of the dinner, Tom said. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Jake came to the party? Yeah, but not in the way you might think, Tom said. He came to break up with Emma, and he did it in front of all of us, Sarah gasped. He broke up with her at Mom's birthday party? Well, not exactly during the party, but right after we finished eating and were getting ready to leave the restaurant. Jake had been quiet all evening, and then when we were settling the bill, he asked to speak to Emma privately. But Emma insisted that whatever he had to say, he could say in front of the family. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Jake had mentioned that Sarah's situation had made him question his relationship with Emma, but she hadn't expected him to act on those feelings so quickly. What did he say? Sarah asked. He told Emma that he couldn't continue dating someone who treated their family members with such cruelty, Tom recounted. He said that watching how she excluded you from the birthday planning and listening to the way she talked about you had shown him a side of her character that he couldn't respect. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions, gratitude toward Jake for standing up for her, but also guilt that her situation had led to Emma's relationship ending. How did Emma react? Sarah asked. She was furious, Tom said. She started yelling at Jake, saying that he didn't understand our family and that he was choosing to believe your manipulation over her truth. She accused him of falling for your victim act and said that she was glad to find out what kind of person he really was. That must have been awful to witness, Sarah said, genuinely feeling bad for everyone who had been put in that uncomfortable situation. It was, Tom agreed, but it was also really eye-opening. Hearing Emma talk about you that way in front of Mom and Dad with such anger and contempt, I realized that I had been telling myself that the way we treated you was just normal sibling stuff. But it's not normal, Sarah. Normal siblings don't exclude each other from important family events. Normal siblings don't talk about each other with such disrespect. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she heard Tom acknowledging what she had experienced for years. Having one of her siblings finally recognize and validate her feelings was overwhelming. Mom and Dad were horrified by Emma's outburst, Tom continued. Dad told Emma that her behavior was unacceptable and that Jake was right to call her out on it. Mom started crying and said that she was ashamed that she had raised children who could treat their sister so poorly. What did David do during all this? Sarah asked. That's the thing that really got to me, Tom said. David just sat there and didn't defend you at all. Even when Emma was saying terrible things about you, even when Mom was crying, David just looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. I realized that his silence was just as bad as Emma's cruelty. Tom's voice became more emotional as he continued, and I realized that I've been just as bad as David. I've been sitting back and watching you get excluded and dismissed, and I've told myself that it wasn't my problem, or that I didn't want to get involved. But that's not being neutral, Sarah. That's being complicit. Tom, you don't have to, Sarah started to say. No, I do have to say this. Tom interrupted. I've been a coward and I've let you down as a brother. You've never done anything to deserve the way we've treated you. You've always been kind and patient even when we didn't deserve it. You've tried so hard to fit in and be part of the family. And we've made you feel like you had to earn your place instead of just accepting that you belonged here. Sarah was crying now, both from the pain of hearing her experiences acknowledged and from the relief of finally having one of her siblings understand what she had been going through. I want to do better, Tom said. I want to be the brother you deserve to have. I know I can't undo years of letting you down, but I want to start over if you'll let me. Of course, Tom, Sarah said through her tears. I would love that. There's something else I want to tell you, Tom said. After Jake left and Emma stormed off, and after Mom and Dad went home, David and I stayed and talked for a while. I think seeing Emma's reaction tonight made David realize some things too. What did he say? Sarah asked. He admitted that he's always felt awkward about the adoption situation, but not in the way Emma does, Tom explained. Emma resents that you're not biologically related and treats you like an outsider because of it. But David said he's always felt guilty about having privileges in a family connection that you didn't have before you came to live with us. This was a perspective Sarah had never considered before. She had always assumed David's distance was similar to Emma's resentment. But apparently his motivations were different. He said he never knew how to relate to you because he didn't want to say or do anything that might remind you of what you'd lost or what you'd been through before the adoption, Tom continued. But he realizes now that his attempt to be sensitive actually came across as rejection and exclusion. Does he want to work on our relationship too? Sarah asked hopefully. He said he does, but he's not sure how to start, Tom said. He's worried that too much damage has been done and that you might not want to try to rebuild a relationship with him. Sarah considered this. David's distance had hurt her for years, but knowing that it came from misguided sensitivity rather than malicious intent made it feel like something that could potentially be repaired. What about Emma? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Tom sighed heavily. I don't know, Sarah. After Jake broke up with her and called her out publicly, she's angrier than I've ever seen her. She's blaming you for the whole situation, saying that you somehow manipulated Jake into taking your side. I barely know Jake, Sarah said. We've maybe had 5 conversations total, and most of those were just polite small talk at family gatherings. I know that, and so does everyone else who was paying attention, Tom said. But Emma is not in a rational place right now. She's humiliated about the breakup happening in front of the family, and she's directing all of that anger at you. Sarah felt a familiar knot in her stomach. Even when she tried to step away from family drama, it seemed to follow her. Now she was being blamed for Jake's decision to end his relationship with Emma, even though she had never asked him to get involved or encouraged him to break up with her sister. I'm worried about how she's go. 3 months after Margaret's birthday situation, Sarah's family dynamics had shifted in ways she never could have predicted. The changes hadn't been easy or smooth, but they had been significant and largely positive. Tom had kept his promise about being a better brother. He started texting Sarah regularly, asking about her classes and her life at college. He invited her to go to movies when she was home for weekends, and he made sure to include her in conversations during family dinners. Most importantly, he started speaking up when Emma made dismissive comments about Sarah, something that had never happened before. David had reached out to Sarah about 2 weeks after the birthday party incident. Their first conversation had been awkward, with David struggling to articulate his feelings and motivations. But over time, they had begun to rebuild their relationship. David's approach was different from Tom's. He was more reserved and careful with his words, but Sarah could tell he was making a genuine effort to include her and treat her as an equal family member. Margaret and Roberto had followed through on their promise to address The family dynamics more directly. They instituted weekly family meetings when Sarah was home from college, during which everyone was expected to participate in discussions about family plans, concerns, and celebrations. These meetings weren't always comfortable, but they ensured that Sarah's voice was heard and her presence was acknowledged in family decision-making. The most dramatic change had been with Emma. After Jake's public breakup with her, Emma had become even more hostile toward Sarah, initially blaming her for the relationship's end. But Margaret and Roberto had made it clear that Emma's behavior toward Sarah was no longer acceptable. They had several difficult conversations with Emma about respect, family unity, and the consequences of her actions. Emma was required to attend family therapy sessions with a counselor who specialized in adoptive family dynamics. At first, Emma had been resistant and sullen during these sessions, but gradually she had begun to acknowledge some of her feelings and behaviors. The process was slow and sometimes painful, but it was progress. Sarah had also started seeing the family therapist individually to work through her own feelings about the years of exclusion and different treatment she had experienced. Having a professional help her understand that her hurt, feelings were valid and that she deserved better treatment, had been healing in ways she hadn't expected. The therapist had helped Sarah understand that her gratitude for being adopted, while genuine and appropriate, didn't mean she had to accept being treated as a second-class family member. She learned to set boundaries and advocate for herself in ways that felt respectful but firm. Jake had become an unexpected ally and friend during this process. After breaking up with Emma, he had maintained a friendship with Sarah that was based on mutual respect and understanding. He often checked in with her about how the family situation was progressing, and he provided an outside perspective that helped Sarah maintain clarity about her relationships. "You seem so much more confident lately," Jake observed during one of their coffee meetings near Sarah's college campus. "The family drama seems to be affecting you differently than it used to." Sarah nodded, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "I think I've finally learned that I can't control how other people treat me, but I can control how I respond to it and what I'm willing to accept." "That's huge," Jake said. "I remember when we first talked about this situation, you seemed to think that any conflict or discomfort in your family was automatically your fault or your responsibility to fix. I've learned that wanting to be included and treated fairly isn't asking too much," Sarah said, "and that the people who really love me will want to treat me well, not make me jump through hoops to earn basic respect." Their conversation was interrupted when Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Tom. "Family meeting tonight at 7. We're planning Emma's birthday celebration and want to make sure we do it right this time. Your input is needed and wanted." Sarah smiled as she showed the message to Jake. "Look at that. A family celebration where my participation is explicitly requested from the beginning, not treated as an afterthought or complication." "How does it feel?" Jake asked. "Good," Sarah said, and she meant it. "It feels like progress." The family meeting that evening went better than Sarah had expected. Emma was still somewhat distant with Sarah, but she was polite and didn't make any dismissive comments. When Sarah suggested ideas for Emma's birthday celebration, Emma actually listened and incorporated some of Sarah's suggestions into the final plan. After the meeting, Margaret pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "I want to thank you for your patience during this whole process," Margaret said. "I know it hasn't been easy having the family dynamics change so dramatically, and I know you've had to deal with some difficult situations." "It's been worth it," Sarah said honestly. "I finally feel like I have a real place in this family, not just a conditional spot that depends on everyone else's comfort level." "You always had a real place here," Margaret said firmly. "But I'm glad that place is finally being acknowledged and respected by everyone else." A few days later, Sarah received a message that surprised her completely. It was from Emma, and it was longer than any communication Emma had ever sent her before. "Sarah, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened over the past few months. The family therapy sessions have made me realize some things about myself that are hard to face. I've treated you unfairly for years, and I've justified it with excuses that don't hold up to scrutiny. You didn't ask to be adopted into our family, but you also didn't deserve to be made to feel like you had to constantly prove you belonged here. I'm working on changing my attitude and my behavior, and I want to apologize for the years of making you feel excluded and unwelcome." I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I'm committed to doing better going forward. I hope we can eventually have the kind of sister relationship we should have had all along." Sarah read the message 3 times before responding. Emma's apology felt genuine and thoughtful, acknowledging specific behaviors and their impact on Sarah. It wasn't perfect, but it was a significant step forward. Sarah responded, "Thank you for this message, Emma. I can see that you've put a lot of thought into it, and I appreciate your honesty about what's happened between us. I'm willing to work on rebuilding our relationship if you are. It might take time, but I think we can get to a better place." Emma's response came quickly. "I'd like that. Maybe we could get coffee sometime when you're home from college. Just the 2 of us, no family drama or outside pressure. We could start fresh." 6 months after the birthday party that had initially excluded her, Sarah found herself getting ready for Emma's birthday celebration, a celebration that she had helped plan from the beginning and where her presence was not only welcomed but actively wanted by her family members. As she prepared to drive home for the weekend, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. She had learned to advocate for herself, her family had learned to treat her with the respect she deserved, and relationships that had seemed irreparably damaged had begun to heal. The most important lesson Sarah had learned was that belonging to a family wasn't something she had to earn through perfect behavior or endless patience with poor treatment. Belonging was something she deserved simply by being a member of the family, and anyone who couldn't accept that wasn't someone whose approval she needed to seek. Jake had been right when he told her to focus on the relationships that worked rather than trying to force acceptance from people who weren't willing to give it. By stepping back from trying to please everyone and starting to advocate for herself, Sarah had actually created space for genuine relationships to develop with the family members who were willing to do the work. As Sarah drove home for Emma's birthday celebration, she felt peaceful and optimistic about her family relationships for the first time in years. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she finally felt confident that she belonged on the journey.